All right, thanks, Arko. Thank you, Dimitri, for giving the prehistoric brief on the Iof. And thank you, Onto Common, Arko, and Hedi for allowing us to have the Iof Day in the Onto Common workshop. So I'm not sure if my talk is really fitting the semantic of the keynote. So basically, I will be giving the update on the Iof. A little bit of the history and also the update and what I think should happen next, particularly with the Iof core and the Iof architecture. So my name is Serm. I work at the National Institute of Standard and Technology in Maryland. So we known for short as the NIST. NIST is part of the US Department of Commerce. We are a federal research lab. We have about 3,000 people working on the main campus and a few hundred in Colorado, mainly just physicists. So today I can represent the Iof governance board, and also I'm also part of the Iof technical oversight board, and I partner in crime of the Iof core with Eloj and Chrisville and the Barry. And I also quite active in the supply chain and the production planning and scheduling working group, the PPS, and also the architecture task group. So I'll talk about the history, where we are, and what's next. So Dimitri already gave the history of the Iof. So when we formed the Iof, we have the mission to advance the data interoperability with the well-defined and principle-based develop reference ontology, so that people can extend it to make more refinement. We may call it subdomain and application ontologies for use in the actual data interoperability. So we are inspired by other ontology efforts like the OBO Foundry, Open Biomedical Ontology Foundry, the FIBO, and also the Iof Foundation Ontology. So I don't know how many of you know about Iof. They are focusing on the also the pharmaceutical industry ontology, particularly laboratory information. So we think also we need Iof ontology because although over the past 20 years there are a lot of engineering ontology developed. They were kind of fragmented, they are inconsistent, and there is lack of the continuous support to develop and document this ontology. So that's why the Iof has come about. In addition to Dimitri private conversation with the number of people. Getting a little bit of echo. So as Dimitri said, in 2016, December, the Iof kind of was formed. We had the first workshop at NIST. We have roughly about 30-some people there. So thanks to Dimitri and Barry, and I think Hedi was also involved in creating of that first workshop. Then we talked a lot during that time, and about a year later, we started a project called the Iof Proof of Concept, where we kind of poll the most popular terms in the in industrial manufacturing domain, because where we don't know where to start from, right? So we decided, okay, we just need to focus on some number of terms, and we just pick, okay, just 20. Let's see if we can do it to get to a good ontology. So we poll the participants. At that time, we have 60, 70 participants. We rank the terms, and we picked 20 terms, and then also at that time 4 working groups was formed. But they are kind of like waiting for the Iof core. And then, as Dimitri said, it took us quite a long journey. almost over a year to pick the top level ontology. Going through a lot of long evaluation process, take like 6-7 months, specify a bunch of criteria, giving the weight to each of these criteria, and having everyone specifying their weighting on the top level ontology. So we end up with the BFO, and we know that maybe none of this is going to be none of this top level ontology is going to be totally perfect, but we need a starting point, and everybody should kind of adhere to one at that point, and then make the adjustment as necessary. So in fact, after the Iof Core version 1 beta, we did added some additional terms that Barry kind of accept that those terms should be added to the BFO later on, and he also admitted the additional work that BFO has to do to be able to facilitate our domain better. So as the Iof Core kind of getting formidable, so industry companies start asking, okay, well, if we're gonna use the Iof content, who is gonna be owning the intellectual property so that they don't get sued from using the Iof content. So that's why the Iof was transformed from just a community of interest into a legal entity, and we formed this under the Open Application Group Consortium, OAGI. So OAGI is kind of a good place because it has been publishing a standard for enterprise application integrations for over 25 years, almost 30 years now. So it's kind of in the same kind of scope for the OAGI to have this kind of standard. So we instituted IP policy, the whole everyone who was an Iof member at that time, they have to rejoin the Iof again, they have to sign the papers. So it was a long process that Jim helped us going through to get us to become a legal entity, so that industrial company has a confidence in our content. And this year, recently in May, we released the Iof Core Ontology version 1 beta. So that's kind of get us back into the business. So that's kind of the history, and so next I'll tell you a little more about where we are, both organizationally and technically. So after this cycle of transformation into the legal entity, we have member companies who were originally the member, didn't join back, and companies that joined back, and also new company joining us. So today, we have about 180 participants in our mailing list from over 50 organizations. And our organizational structure kind of remain the same. We have this 4 kind of entity, the governance board, the technical oversight board, and the working groups, and also the task group. So our idea is to ensure that all these groups have the overlaps. So the working group chairs of the working group chair are also member of the technical oversight board, and chair of the technical oversight board are also member of the governance board. So the governance board are responsible for administrative and strategy kind of stuff. The technical oversight board are responsible for more overarching technical requirement for developing ontologies, and the working groups are, of course, responsible for domain on reference ontologies. And the task group are also kind of cutting across, so they are responsible for something that is not about domain ontology, but cutting across the working group, such like what the IRI should be, how we should version the ontology, what are the annotations, that kind of stuff. So over the past 2 years or so, when we have the COVID, we have, 2 additional working group. The zero defect manufacturing, I think, led by the Dimitri, and also the material science and engineering, led by Thomas Hank. And we have a total of 8 working groups. The supply chain, led by Fahad, the production planning scheduling, led by Dusan, system engineering, Jinsi, and product service system, Anna, and the maintenance, led by Melinda. And the NT Connect led by the Will Sobel. So I think all the working group shares are here except the maintenance, but I think Marcus represent the maintenance working group here. So in terms of the task group, we have this 6 task group. Only kind of these 2 are active over the past years, but I think there might be something happening behind the scene for this other task group. Particularly the domain independent mid-level ontologies kind of, I think kind of merge into the Iof core somewhat. So the policy and procedure group kind of done with their work. They specify the template for the working group, how to define the charter, the scope, and all that. The architecture group is very active, and I'll talk more about the what the architecture group has been producing over the past years. So in terms of the technical progress, we have these 8 working groups that I mentioned. They of course have their different maturity. So you can see the most green one are kind of more mature, particularly the Iof core, because we are almost releasing the V1. We are at the beta, but the V1 should be coming out soon. The supply chain and the maintenance group, I think, will be the 2 other group that will soon release the reference ontology by the end of this year. The production planning, scheduling, and NT-Connect are the other 2 groups that has the ontology already committed into the our GitHub repo. So these 4 other groups still, cooking up their ontologies, and I think they are looking at the Iof core seriously and trying to validate against their use cases. So I'll give a summary about these few working groups, particularly the Iof core version 1 beta. I think many of you already, I think not all of you, I think many of you might heard the Milosh presentation on the first day, where he dived into detail of the Iof core. So here I'm just giving the summary. So basically, when we work on the core V1, we started from this 20 terms, but it's kind of grow into about 50 classes plus 38 object properties. It was growing, primarily because we try to axiomatize the classes as much as possible, and so and also we try to bring the closure to the axioms. Kind of try to balance between the defined classes and also the primitive class. So we also, the other thing we try to do is avoid like kind of hard to define terms. Thank you, Arco. Hard to define term in the definition. So we really try to avoid the term like intent or interest in the definition. I guess it's not just hard to define, it kind of doesn't sound very engineered about this. So we try to avoid that, and I think we successfully did that. Initially, there were a lot of like definition within this word in the definition, like intent or interest. So we end up with the 57 classes, and I'm very happy to say that all the 57 classes are axiomatized. So we have 100% axiomatized classes. So no classes without axiom that is beyond the A is a subclass of B. right? So we try to be more as formal as we could. So, when we compare with the Common Core Ontology, it's only 90% axiomatized. So most of the classes are, only, just has a subclass assertion, like A is a subclass of B. So out of these 57 classes, we have 20 that are defined classes. These are like 35%. Right? Comparing to the CCO, it's only 4% defined classes. So the rest, we call it primitive because they don't have the necessary and sufficient condition. But even that, we have 12 of them that has the sufficient conditions, and the rest, has at least the necessary condition. So we have 38 object properties, not many axioms, we can provide for the object properties. We try as much as we can, so some 5 property has at least, some functional inverse or transitive, check boxes in the project. Terms, we also try to reuse a term from CCO, from Bible, and also from the biomedical domain, particularly the ontology for biomedical investigation, the OBI. We also look at, reference like the ISO definition. So if you look at the core ontology, you will see some annotation where we reference the ISO definition also. Some of the highlights in the ontology, we have various kind of information content entity, basically at the higher level, related to specification. We have things like a design specification, plan specification, requirement specification. We also end up specifying the location as the synonym of the BFO site. We define product, component, resource, engineer systems, and various kind of plan process, and also the state and event. So we have not addressed software in the Iof core. Barry kind of talked us out of it, and he promised that he will come back with more entity and more design pattern for us to address the software and also the cyber physical system. So the core is built based primarily on the expressivity. So if you look at the core, there's like a first order logic annotation, but we didn't exploit the whole FOL expressivity. We stay within the R. And even though we stay within the R, we don't assume the openable assumption. So for example, when we talk about the design specification, so we know that the design specification, when you make a design, you may not have the actual thing yet, right? So instead of saying that the design specification prescribes some continuant, so we kind of avoid that, and we say prescribe only continuant. So it doesn't require that the thing exists, when you have the design. But on the other hand, we also strengthen the ontology by providing this sufficient condition, right? So we say, okay, well, but if you have the information content entity that already prescribe the continuant, and satisfy some other axiom, so we can conclude that that thing is a design specification. So this one, although we don't have like necessary and sufficient conditions, you can see that we have a necessary condition and a sufficient condition are separate. So, oops. So what left right now, mainly in the Iof core V1 beta to become the V1 is really to refresh our annotation to match the latest annotation guideline from the Iof technical architecture. And I think Sobel will talk about that. He has been leading the effort. And I also give a summary a little bit after this. So a little bit of the supply chain reference ontology from Farhad. It was motivated by grain testability in the agricultural space. and also manufacturing services use case, how to form the supply chain based on manufacturing services. It's pretty big ontology right now. You can see that it has right now 146 classes. 20 of them might need to be moved to the core, and it also add another 11 object properties. So the supply chain added notion like facility, various kind of locations, identification method like code identification, location identification, business identification. We added those, and various kind of agent and role in the supply chain to be able to model the supply chain relation and the occurrences, and also various kind of supply chain policies like transportation, movement kind of stuff. One of the interesting thing that Fahad did recently is to model the multi-part supply chain relation to be able to capture multi-party kind of involvement related to the buyer, the seller, the shipper, and the product and service, in the supply chain relation. So this ontology already went through one round of the Iof review, and Fahad has addressed a lot of the comments from the community. He has a lot of axioms now in the R representation, and he is also working on the finalizing the annotation to match up with the new annotation vocabulary and guideline. Bonus to that is Fahad also tried to provide example data, but he told me that he's also facing some challenge that the example data need to point to both the universal and also the individual. So we'll talk more, I guess, this afternoon about what this challenge is. Tell you the truth, I don't quite understand it, but it's also something that also mentioned by the maintenance ontology, that the actual data need to also reference the class and individual and give them some challenges. So the maintenance ontology is kind of small at this point. They work this based on 3 application ontologies, and they only add about 15 classes and 2 object properties to the Iof core. The highlights are maintenance activity, state, and the failure events. So they summarize that the core needs some more notion to support their entities, including something like a strategy and also the order. So this is interesting. I think we need to discuss, whether this notion are really different from the plan specification already in the core and how they are different, right? Whether we really need a separate notion as the superclass of this kind of entity. In terms of the PPS, product planning and scheduling, I think Dushan has a pretty huge ontology. It's not clear how he is going to modularize it and what are going to be included in the V1. But in terms of what he has been working on is, meteorology of the manufacturing processes. So he said he has defined a 3D process model based on the PSL, but provide additional details beyond what the PSL or GOE supported. So I guess we will hear more from Dushan this afternoon. And he also work on the capability, how to explain the capability of the resources and the processes. And one of the most important thing is the last bullet, because we are now interested in the digital thread and digital twin. So we need to be able to model a lot of digital artifacts, different kinds of model, simulation model, design concept, detail design, those kind of things, and how to relate those to the physical counterpart. And also related to the various stages of the occurrence also, in the biopharma, I will explain it a little bit later. So Dushan plan to have a version 1 draft by the end of next year. So that is his plan. There's still a lot of work to do. So after the Iof core release, there have been a few pilots. So yesterday we heard one pilot from the Rebecca that they did in the quality project with Airbus and Dimitri group. I'm also involved in the pilot in the biopharmaceutical industry, which is slightly different from the pharmaceutical. It may not be slightly different depending on who you talk to. Right? If you ask me, Lord, he said it's totally different. But they also use the ISA 88 standard traditionally to enable their information flow. So the Iof core was extended to address notion in the ISA 88. For example, the core was extended to represent various kind of plants in the process industry. So basically, ISA 88 is a standard for process industry, and it's kind of counterpart of the ISA 95 standard. So they extend the core to represent various kind of plant. In this industry, they call it recipes. This various kind of plant represent, plant at different level of the specificities. You have enterprise level plan, you have like all the way to the plant specific plan. We also extend core to represent occurrence data, such as measurements and executed data, like the occurrence of the process and also parameter setting, and also equipment data. So far, the companies that took the Iof core and extend this, they were pretty happy with the Iof core, providing a good basis for representing, and the separation between the information, the physicality, and also the process type and the occurrence. So because the core doesn't have the data property at all, so we experimented with using the QUDT with the Iof core. So far it's fine. So I don't know if we need to. I guess we need to relook at this. How does this fit into the DFO overall? So as I said, the core doesn't have data properties at this point, so we have to work on that. And there's no patterns for capturing like different stages, many stages of the process and also the occurrence. For example, in the biopharma industry, right, you need to they have a plan that specify the ranges of the parameter that need to be set in the process. But at the execution, a certain setting will be done, and then they need to measure the actual parameter value that occur in the process. So there is no pattern for specifying this. So I and Milosh are working closely with the group, and we plan to bring this back to the production planning and scheduling working group, because this is related to digital objects and their relation to the actual object. How much time do I have? 5 minutes. 5 minutes?
To allow some discussion.
Oh, okay. So the architecture task group, they coming up with the vocabulary, annotation, vocabulary, and guidelines. I would call it V2 because this is a redo after we did the Iof core. We have a lot of experience. We provide comment to the architecture task group. So they simplify a lot of things, eliminate the elucidation, and now we are very also specific about the various kind of axioms in the annotation and specify whether the class is primitive or non-primitive. So this kind of stuff. And will also help us set up the GitHub repository for the working groups. There are two GitHub repo for each working group. They are connected. We'll provide the guidelines on how to use this. Release a labeling strategy, II specification, and we will also kind enough to help us set up the resolvable II server, so the Iof content can be accessed by the internet. So what's next? Organizationally, it's very important that we release the Iof core soon because we want to become a staff organization. So the Iof has a lot of technical resources, a lot of smart people, but nobody wants to do any administrative job. So we need people to do administrative jobs. So we need to pay them. So we need to be a fee-based organization. So right now there's no fee, but soon we will instill some fee because we need people to work on the membership engagement, organizational outreach, and produce more documentation to help industry adopt Iof content better. And we also have been contacted by several organizations like Digital Twin Consortium, the Sesame, and so we need some people to develop the strategy to work with these other organizations. So in the Iof architecture, we already set up a number of components to help with the Iof development and publication of the ontology, but these are disparate components. And there's still lack of some components to help with the consistency checking and compliance checking to the annotation guideline, to the Iof technical principle document. So NIST has provided some funding to the EDM Council, led by Elisa and Will Sobel, to help Iof connect these components together. So they're going to help us develop the continuous integration and continuous development infrastructure to be able to do this mostly automatically. So they also will develop the overarching, development and publication process. Resolving issue like how to move the terms around between the domain ontology and also from the domain ontology to the Iof core, with list pane to the industry adopter, how to deprecate the terms, what are considered backward compatible change or incompatible changes. Also, we need to work on the next version of annotation guide because we need to tie some loose in there. How to use the synonym, antonym, those kind of things. Not antonym, but acronym very well. And we might also be revisiting the Iof core decoupled version because some people don't want to see a BFO. They have a headache if they see a BFO, so we try to decouple the Iof core from the BFO. And also some people might be interested in mapping link the Iof core to another top level ontology. So we'll see if we can enable that. In terms of the Iof core, there are a bunch of work that we need to do. I mentioned earlier data properties, capture digital objects, and Barry will come back to us with how to represent software and kind of cyber physical system. I think also we kind of owe it to the community to have a better documentation around quality and process characteristics. Kind of a little bit confusing term how to use them. And comment from the maintenance working group to model the contract and order kind of entity. And we also need to work on better explanation on the temporalized variations because we have moved from the BFO 2.0 to BFO 2020, and it has a temporal notion in the relationship. I'll skip that last part and go to the summary. So in my view, the Iof core, V1 that is to be coming is, pretty much the first industrial ontology that has been standardized that can represent, both the process and the kind of physical entity information in a clear way, but also understandable by the domain expert with, rich documentation. So I want to stress again that, releasing Iof core version 1 is very important. So we don't want to kind of take any step back from releasing this V1 from the initial pilot of Iof Core. I don't see any major issue report from those pilots. Another thing we may need to change is to elevate the notion of the machine to higher, because there was some difficulty in capturing the class. There's the very similar notion, like a machine, the device, and the tool. So we may want to elevate that to the notion of the equipment. So right now we have machine there, and then we just need to finish those annotation. Also, I think Iof Core is already, a very good quality ontology. From my interaction with industry, mostly, we already in front of them, because when they talk about ontology at this stage, they still only talk about the data dictionary in their view, to have like a clearly document terms in the industry. But Iof Core and several other modules is going beyond that, specifying a lot of axioms, which will help industry in the adoption, and interoperability, because it gives a much better clarification about each of the terms. So on the last note, I want to leave the same comment I did yesterday, that we don't want to underestimate the importance of the ability to allow the Iof adopter to document their local jargon. So right now the annotation vocabulary has the terms like a synonym, but I think it needs more structure to that, to be able to document the context of the synonym, where is it used. And also we may need to tell industry, how to specify that, to be able to separate, that synonyms from the whatever is belonging to the Iof, and to indicate that, okay, these are the local synonym from the specific organization. So
thank you very much, sir. Just before the coffee break and the split of the event in 3 rooms, that as you have in your program. So, any questions to sir or comments?
Okay, thanks. So, as a software programmer, so I have one question. Is because we already have in our several European project, I think now the core specification is very good used already. But as a software programmer, so I have one question, is that maybe in the future we already have the ontology, but if we will have some type of open source software to support this, to make the engineers can understand this better. So that's my question. So in the future, what we will do on this aspect?
Well, I think as part of the so one thing I know is as part of the project that we are going to start with the EDM Council, they will provide some software also to generate documentation, right, from the ontology, so that it's easier to read, by a domain expert and potentially also the software engineer who implement ontology. So that's one of the things, and I think we'll take a closer look into whatever the Ontol Common is developing, the Ocean and the OCES, and see how can leverage that the product of the Ontol Common.
You want to add something?
No, I'm thinking any more questions.
Any other question? Eddie?
I'd like to ask if there is any plan. I'd like to ask if there is any plan to develop a relation ontology dedicated for manufacturing.
You said relation ontology?
Yeah, it's like what exists for CCO.
Yeah, I think we we have no plan to have a separate module just for relation. So all the object properties are, in the Iof core already. So we didn't have a plan to have a separate module at this point. It's all in the core module.
Yeah, but I think working groups are entitled to develop relations as they need.
I said working groups should be able to extend those relations. I don't think that they should involve new ones, but specialize them for the domain of manufacturing. I don't know if you meant that, right?
Yes.
I think we are doing that at least in production planning.
Yeah, I mean, all the working group add the data property and object properties to their ontology module. So,
Are they aligned between groups?
of course, we try to align.
That's why we have the TOB, technical oversight.
Yeah.
And then
So the working group ontology are reviewed by the whole Iof. It's not just by the working group.
Any other comment or? Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Now you have the coffee break, and then you have in room E1, so the working groups, production planning, and the scheduling and supply chain in room E1. In room E2 is about system engineering and digital twins, and in room E3 is about materials and quality and maintenance. So, and then in these rooms will follow until the end of the day. And at the end of the day, we will have the keynote speech of Professor Maria Alba, and then we will talk about the Iof governance and architecture to close the event today. Thank you. You say that.
So we need to empty this room for now, so please take your belongings with you. And the coffee is served next door as you know. Thank you.